The views and opinions expressed on the Pier 6 Roundtable are those of the hosts, guests and callers, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, its management, other hosts or underwriters. Listen at your own risk.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our main event of the evening. A Pier 6 brawl with a 1-hour time limit. And now, here is the undisputed, true voice of pro wrestling in New England, the Pier 6 Wrestling Roundtable.
Wonderful!
You listen to me, you go to the top. Don't listen to me, you're never heard from again.
Ha ha! Delete! Oh, kiss your boots if you can do it! But to be the man, you gotta beat the man!
And what's he gonna do when Hulkamania and the largest arms in the world destroy you?
Using this word jabroni, and it's awesome.
Tuned here to BSRlive.com. Brown Student Community Radio. We are on the terrestrial airwaves at 101.1 FM, WBRU-LP, WFOO-LP, WVVX-LP Providence. We're so big they can't handle us with one set of call letters. We got 3
letters.
It's a whole virtual alphabet soup like an indie guy's resume.
It's like New England.
So you're tuned to the Pier 6 Roundtable, coming to you every Saturday morning here on BSR, Brown Student Community Radio, and we're shot out like a cannon now that I got my coffee. Woo! I didn't have my coffee, and then I got it, and Richie saved my life. So in the studio,
Glad
as usual, the co-host riding shotgun, the king of all zebras.
Yes.
The high-class one. The outlaw, Rich Bass, in studio.
I like that so much. It's going to be a t-shirt.
King of all zebras?
Yep.
Good, I get $1 a shirt. Woohoo! Rich is like, yeah, right. I bought you coffee. You're lucky I got that.
I'll give you a shirt.
Yeah. You got to get them in size extra tubby.
Indie wrestling fan size.
There you go. Oh, so if it's indie wrestling fan size, I'll take a medium.
Medium. Well, they're either schmediums.
Medium.
They're either schmediums or 5X.
Medium to 5X. I love medium. That's tremendous. Medium. All right.
It's got to get him a canopy.
And go to Omar the tent maker. You know the guy who made Abdullah the Butcher's? So that other voice you're hearing in studio, it's been a long time since he's been in studio with us, but
it's been a long time since we've rocked and rolled.
There's but a gentleman who used to be, he's definitely one of the original Pier 6 Roundtable guys. And,
one of?
Yeah, one of.
Me, Dupree over here.
Yeah, one of the original, as in one of us. One of the original guys.
3 amigos.
The 3 amigos. Caleb Seltzer back in studio.
Hello. I miss you, man.
Yeah, man.
I miss you.
And we were talking about shrimp, Boff.
My personal life is at a 2, and my professional life is at a 9. I miss you, man.
No. So if you're following us on social media, you don't need this information. But if you're not, why aren't you? Pier 6 WR on Twitter. Facebook.com/Pier 6 WR. My Twitter is Voodoo Bass and Sax.
Hammer it.
Rich is at Real Rich Bass. Caleb, where do you? You've got 100 different Twitters and Facebooks and whatever.
At Caleb Seltzer.
With a C.
With a C.
Not a K.
Caleb Seltzer.
And
like the water.
So if you're just tuning in, my name is Matt. They call me the Mad Dog. We're gonna go into lots of stuff today. We've this is our first time in probably 3 months that we haven't had a, in quotes, guest in studio.
It's OG.
But that's okay because there's lots to talk about, and we're actually going to switch the format up Not at all. What we're going to do is, you like that?
Sweet pre-promotion.
What we're going to do is, normally we have our sort of format that we follow when we have an interview in, and there's sort of our generic questions that we go through that sort of they're the framework that we lead our interviews with. And what I was thinking about last night, when people were just like, I can't get up at 6 a.m. Not that they have to be up at 6 a.m. to be here, but people suddenly couldn't be here for their interview times. Yeah, it's okay. We got good interviews coming up. We actually have some really good guests coming up. Teaser next week. We have the head trainer of Top Rope Promotions Lockup, the former Ryan Waters. Ryan Drew will be here in studio.
Oh, yeah. That'll be a good one.
Ryan, quite a polarizing guy as far as he's one of those guys that people in New England, as far as the wrestlers and the people in the either really like or really don't like. But I mean, talk about a guy who came up through the wrestling business through very humble beginnings. I mean, the way he started, and really is one of the top trainers in the area. You know, he is just the guys that he puts out of there are phenomenal, and you know he's very much responsible for a lot of the work with guys like Matt Taven and Vinny Marseglia, who both just headlined, main evented New Japan Pro Wrestling last
cool
night.
is that?
You know, in a losing effort. Them and TK O'Ryan, another Ryan Drew guy, they lost to basically the top wrestlers of New Japan in Okada and Tanahashi and I forget who it might have been Juice Robinson tagging with them.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
No. So, you know, seeing pictures of Vinny Marseglia posting up, walking down the street in Japan, and like Rich Bass is like, come a long way from Fairhaven, haven't you, brother?
Yeah.
And
big difference.
You know, it's awesome. How many, you know, when we see all these guys who we on, you know, on any given night we're in whatever Armory or VFW hall, we're seeing guys, you know, headlining New Japan shows, and it's becoming more common. I mean, now it's been Taven and Vinny and TK, and then before that, Mike Bennett, and you know, around just after that, Hanson with at the time War Machine, but now War Raiders. It's an awesome time to be involved with the wrestling business, either as a fan, a former wrestler, a current wrestler, or whatever, because you're seeing guys who you watch put the grind, or you're putting the grind in, and you're getting traction. We were talking on the ride in. Rich will talk a little bit about the Chaotic Wrestling show that he worked last night. But the main event was JT Dunn with MJF. MJF was a guy who, like 3 years ago, Caleb and I were shooting Maryland Championship Wrestling shows, and he was a guy they brought in, and you know, he had a good gimmick, and you could see that there was a lot of potential. But you know, in 3 years, this is a kid who just has put the work and got a ton of traction with that, and now you know he's right on that All Elite Wrestling roster, and Cody and the Young Bucks are super high on him. So I mean, it's really cool to be able to see on those same shows. Leo Rush, you know, was on those shows, and here he is, you know, on pay-per-view. And, you know, it's just we're seeing a lot of that stuff happen. We're seeing a lot of success on the local level, and it's a great time to see indie wrestling happen. You're getting more and more crowds breaking 1,000 or more, so it's good stuff. So what we're going to do with the show today is that framework that we usually sort of follow for our interviews. We're going to use, but we're going to do it in studio. We're going to do it live. Basically, we're going to talk a little bit because it's been some time since we've done this, and I know really our core fans who listen now are more newer fans. We do have some fans who were spilled over from the old days, but really with the ability to broadcast terrestrially on BRULP, and then you know, we're getting a bunch of new people listening. So I thought it'd be cool if we kind of went through, while we've done some shows where we've talked about it, I thought it'd be cool if we sort of use those questions that we use and usually have our guests go through, but sort of in studio talk about it. And I think it'll be interesting to sort of see in the frame of that where the three of us kind of met is part of it and became friends, because you know, I knew Rich for quite a few years, and then when we switched things from PWF and we were doing NECW, then young Master Seltzer came along, and you know, it was it's interesting how that all comes about, and while they talk about the fraternity of wrestling and how it builds these great friendships, you know, some of those friendships end up transcending the business, so it'd be cool to talk about.
It's funny that you mentioned how we've gotten new fans from where we were before. Now on a weekly basis, especially because we have a lot of XWA fans that listen to us. Down at the event center, I will get chants and people yelling at me about the radio show from the crowd, about how they like this Rich Bass better and how the radio show sucks and this they're getting heat. So it's very interesting to see the reach that we've actually gotten with the show. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool being on actual radio this time around.
As we are currently, I'm looking up at the screen in front of me. We are attempting in studio. We tried, Rich and I test ran recording with a digital recorder in studio and didn't have quite the resources we needed for it in studio, but we're actually now using the studio computer with Audacity, which should lead to us getting the abilities to archive our shows. So keep an eye on the Facebook page and on the Twitter. We'll let you know when archive shows are, if they are available and where they'll be available for you to check out. But that should allow those who aren't available to listen to us live terrestrially or through the stream to catch us at a later date, and probably use your mobile device to be able to listen to it in the car wherever you go. So good stuff. We're working on trying to expand things, and I think that this will be a positive way to move forward with it. So let's get rolling. Let's talk a little bit about us for a change. We've been doing so much talking about the other people. So what made you guys fans? Like, what do you remember of your early days? What was that first thing that caught you?
Well, for me, we've talked about this many times because this was a pay-per-view that you went to, but the 1994 Royal Rumble.
I went with Dave Padula and Gino Giovanni.
That was my first taste of wrestling. For you younger people listening, you might not know, but back in the 90s, there was a thing called the Black Box, and it was a very much illegal way of getting, there was no WWE Network or YouTube, so other than Coliseum home videos, the only other way, really, to get tapes, unless you were tape trading, but I was too young for that, was to either watch it on pay-per-view or somehow find, these illegally taped pay-per-views off the Black Box. And of all people, my sweet grandma Bass,
Granny Bass,
recorded the 1994 Royal Rumble off the Black Box gimmick, and said, "Here, this is something that you might be interested in." Like, I was 8 years old, popped it in, and first match I remember seeing is Brett and Owen against the Quebecers. And I was hooked instantly. That was it for me. Like the colorful characters and the over-the-top, Johnny Polo on the outside being an idiot and the Quebecers being over the top. And I just gravitated to Bret Hart. And the story coming out of that was, Bret and Owen and all that. So I was just...
So here's a question. This is kind of one of those, we're going to jump back and forth with our conversations. But so that was your first thing of wrestling, watching that and seeing the Quebecers. Fast forward years later. So... you're in the ring with PCO,
right.
Pier of the Quebecers.
Yeah.
Was there that moment, because that was the first, that little Rich Bass, that still, that childhood, that you had to have that moment where you look and go, oh man, this was like one of those guys that the first characters that made me go, wow, I like this.
Yeah, it was more so leading up to it, like knowing that I was going to referee him and Dan Moff. It was a complete wait a minute, this is crazy. This is what I grew up watching. Like that, the line in wrestling is so thin of, wait, you were just on TV to, okay, now you're on this level at Fat Music or whatever, Armory or high school with everybody else. So to be able to share and to see the business that he's doing in 2018 and 2019 is amazing. Now signed with ROH, but yeah, man, he's one of the first people that got me hooked on wrestling. So that was a cool moment.
Yeah, that just hit me when you were saying that about the Quebecers. I'm like, man, it was just last year you were in the ring with the dude in one of those matches that kind of went viral on the web, where people were just like, take a look what this guy in his 50s is doing. This is out of control.
Yeah, clips from that match where one of the, that he got a lot of buzz on the internet, and that's how he got signed, basically, was he was just putting out these crazy videos, and that translated into bookings for him. And, he's doing some pretty amazing stuff, how he's just recreated. I mean, he was a Quebec, a Mountie, and then a pirate. And,
They weren't the Mounties.
Yeah, we're not the Mounties. That's true.
I was in college. I was in my freshman or sophomore year of college when that came out. When they were doing that, and my college roommate at the time, who Jay, who for some time was actually managed me in the NEWA. He was the colonel. We would go to those shows, and we were such big marks for the Quebecers that, like, when they would do the song, we'd stand on our chairs and, like, conduct. Oh man, it was good stuff. So Caleb, what about you? What's your first?
I'm a couple of years younger than Rich, but very much along the same lines. My earliest memory of anything is wrestling. Wrestling has been in my life forever. I don't know a life without it. I really don't. And it sounds weird. It sounds cliche. It sounds corny. Whatever you think of, it's. I can't imagine my life without wrestling.
Imagine that. What a huge void.
If wrestling is not here, I don't know what I would be doing. Honestly, I don't know what I'm doing with my life right now besides wrestling.
But you also you came up in a family where you're like, my parents did not like wrestling.
Right.
My grandfather liked it, but you grew up. I mean, your dad was like a huge Bruno Sammartino.
Wrestling.
Bruno Sammartino was his favorite.
Yeah.
So you grew up in a house where wrestling was embraced.
It was. Wrestling was definitely embraced. My dad was a diehard Bruno fan, looked up to Bruno as if he was a Superman himself. And, my father at the time, we're going back, my earliest recollections is around that same time period, of Rich's time period, 1994, 1993. My dad for a time back then was incapacitated, and so he was regularly watching television, and he was regularly watching me at the time. So, whatever dad is watching, I'm watching, and my mom, famous last words, don't let him watch this.
Sorry,
Next
Ma.
thing you know, Caleb's doing superfly splashes off the headboard of my parents' bed onto my father, who's taking a nap. Oops, okay, I guess I messed up. But yeah, wrestling. Since then, man, wrestling's been my life. It's actually funny. I was sitting at the kitchen table for dinner the other night with my parents and my significant other, and we were talking about an old teacher of mine going back to my elementary school days, and my mother's just kept talking about how, he used to dress up as all the wrestlers for Halloween. Like, we have pictures of me at 6-7 years old dressed up as Hollywood Hogan, like full beard, ensemble.
Who are you kidding? In your adulthood, we've seen you as the Iron Sheik.
Okay, yes, we've done that. But I used to really go like even more so than just the silly iParty like costumes. My mom actually made the Hollywood Hogan bandana. Like it was really cool. It's actually a really cool memory. I just thought of it. It was my mom had to make like this really nice, like out of fabric. She cut it, she sewed it like herself, and it was a custom I think I had an NWO t-shirt, and so she just made this whole like fake beard thing. Like she painted on a beard for me with the Hollywood stash and beard, and that was really cool.
Caleb, you've always had a beard, huh?
Caleb was taking care of some serious NWO Halloween business, brother.
I was, brother. But yeah, man, and then there's cool memories of my dad. He used to take me. I think my first show was probably 1995 or 96, when I was able to handle it. But I remember my dad used to take me to all the local signings of a picture of a very, very young Caleb Seltzer with Hollywood Hogan at a very rare appearance in New England that Hogan made. And I remember I wore the sunglasses, and the only thing I really remember about this whole thing was Hogan looked to me, and he was a heel. He was the biggest heel. He was about to wrestle Roddy Piper or something like that on a major pay-per-view. And he goes, he turns to young me and he goes, I was wearing sunglasses. And he goes, nice shades, brother.
Nice.
So that was cool. But man, wrestling is just the biggest part of my life. And I think the biggest influence on me, would have been the Macho Man. I think Macho Man, The Undertaker, all those guys, those larger-than-life characters from those early 90s that, like Rich said, those characters, as when you're a Ute, when you see them for the first time, they just captivate your imagination, and you're like, I want to be just like these guys.
Yep.
And man, oh man, here I am.
So
not quite like them, but...
So for me, here I was flipping the channels in, like, 84, watching, there was a thing called Saturday morning cartoons. Like, they got rid of Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah.
Come on. But anyway.
What glorious time.
It used to be every channel, all three network channels that you had. You had 3, maybe 4 if you got a UHF channel in. But you had 3 channels to switch between. But they had cartoons on all of them from like 7 a.m. to like 11 a.m. So you had this 5-hour block of nothing but, 4 to 5 hour block of nothing but cartoons. And so I was watching them, and there was some general awareness of what wrestling was, but didn't really know what it was. And one day, I think it was Bugs Bunny got done, and you got done watching.
Take it home.
Yeah, exactly. And right after that finished, here's this. Hey, this is wrestling. I've heard. And the first thing you see is, they used to start every syndicated Saturday morning show with the footage of Hogan winning the belt. So, and your winner, and new, the Incredible. And so this is that Hulk Hogan guy I'm hearing about. And within like weeks, he's on every lunchbox, every T-shirt, everywhere. And it was larger than life. I'd never seen anything like that. Never, with the exception of, like, at that time, that was like when Kiss was still really big on the makeup. That was like the only thing that you could almost compare. Like, there were people who would dress up like Kiss at like in Providence, and like these guys, with the platform, they're like larger than life, because they're like 6'6", and like that's the only thing I could compare, like that level of awe. Like, what is this? Is And then I found out that my grandfather was a fan in the in the earlier 80s and late 70s. He loved it. So we ended up, one of the things we ended up doing was going to a live event. And Hogan wasn't even on that event. That's when Hogan, the WWF at the time would be every month. They'd be at the Civic Center. They ran regular cards, and then you'd like 3 times a year you'd get Hogan. He'd come in to pop the crowd once. So the first time I go, the main event.
This was in Providence.
Yeah, at the Civic Center, the Dunk.
No.
The main event of the first event I went to with my grandfather was an Intercontinental title match. Tito Santana defending the Intercontinental title against Roddy Piper. So this is pre-WrestleMania 2, because soon thereafter,
the world has come to.
It was only like a few months later that Tito would drop the title to Mach. So it was just, holy cow, we're here and we're actually seeing it. And then at that point, I had a friend in high school, in elementary school, who his dad was part of like the Elks or whatever it was, and they were trying to raise funds. So he's like, hey, my dad's whatever it was are running. They have a wrestling show going around, and I've got tickets. You want tickets? And I'm like, yeah. And they were like $10 a ticket. And I asked my mom. She's like, well, I'm not going, because my mom hated it. Still to this day hates it. But my grandfather, she was like, your grandfather can take you. I was like, all right. So I got the tickets, and we went. And I think I was probably in 5th grade at this point. So we go, and this was Killer Kowalski's All-Star Wrestling.
I have a similar story. Yeah.
So we go, and this is the first time we're front row. When we went to the WWF, we were in the not the nosebleeds, but we were up. Probably 30 or 40 rows up. But here, my grandfather and I are front row, and now he knew Killer Kowalski from his days of being. So he knew who Killer Kowalski was. I didn't know at that time who Killer Kowalski was. I just knew that he was, at the time, he's the big legendary former WWF guy who's going to be this time he was the enforcer referee outside the ring for the main event. But there were guys like Chris Duffy, who was, I had seen on TV. I'd seen him on Saturday mornings getting beat up. There was a guy called the Pink Assassin who did a character that you wouldn't be able to do these days the way he did it, which would, tie it in, and I think I talked about it on the show. My grandfather had brought me to that show, and as a kid, the Pink Assassin was one of those heels where if you were the kid in the front row screaming at him, he would get in your face.
Yep.
Like, oh my God, these wrestlers are interacting with me. And the weekend my grandfather had passed, we had the funeral in the morning, and I went there was a wrestling show, so I had to decompress. It was a great way to just be with friends and do something. And I ended up that night, it was the first time I was ever in the ring with Bobby Shoop, who was the guy who was the Pink Assassin. And I told him, I said, man, the first like live indie show I ever went to was Killer Kowalski's show. My grandfather brought me. You were like you and Chris Duffy were the 2 guys who stood out. but you specifically gave me like a mouth, like, you're right in my face. You gave me an earful, and we buried my grandfather today, and I got to wrestle you tonight. It was really, it was such a cool, and that's wrestling. I mean, that's like, we all have those moments in the business where things like they come full circle. Like I said, like with Rich, with the first faces he sees on wrestling, the Quebecers, and he finds himself in the ring with PCO.
That's awesome.
So, and I mean,
on the other end of that, meeting Bret Hart was not so much fun.
And so let me, as a tie-in, not to steal thunder on this, but Caleb, we're talking about his dad. We call his dad Larry Classic because he's Seltzer Classic, and he's a huge Bruno fan, like we said. Well, later on, Caleb would find himself in a position where he was in the wrestling business and had some connections, and he was able to set up for his dad to have like basically a private one-on-one like visit with Bruno Sammartino, and got some like quality FaceTime, got to talk with him and everything. Like, Caleb was able, because of the wrestling, something that brought him and his dad together, he was able to open the door to his dad's inner child and set that thing, something that his dad will never forget.
I had never seen him like that in my life. That was one of those moments where you're just never going to forget it, because you'd never see someone you look up to so much like I do to my dad. Him and I are the best of friends, inseparable, really. And to see my dad, and I had never seen my dad show signs of weakness, but that day, when he was in front of Bruno Sammartino, he was, and I've never seen him speechless either, and just overcome with emotion. My dad he looked at Bruno, he just shook his head, and he was just like, I don't know what to say. Like, Bruno, you're my hero. Like, he told him just all the things that he went through as a child, and he just said, you're everything to me. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate this time. And Bruno, to his credit, what a great man. He's probably heard this same story from millions of people throughout his life, especially in that era. Excuse me. But Bruno, man, what a consummate gentleman. Such a nice guy. He just listened to everything. And we were in Pittsburgh for this event, and we had driven all the way from Boston to come and see Bruno. And so as soon as my dad said, we drove all the way from Boston to see you, and Bruno's eyes lit up. He was so surprised. He goes, "You came from Boston? Oh my God, I remember Boston." And he started talking about, and he was, man, this guy was sharp as a tack, man, all the way to the end, because he could tell you after the end of every match, I would go to the North End, I would have a big plate of Italian food. I was hungry as a bear. That was his thing. He was hungry as a bear. And so that was the greatest thing. I think that's probably top 5, as Bruce would say, top 5 moments of my life. That moment.
And it's great that Bruno, as a human being, stood up. Like, he was so deserving and so needed to be in the Hall of Fame. Like the Hall of Fame, like a lot of us said, it didn't have that legitimacy. I mean, again, it's Vince McMahon. It's whoever he chooses to put in there. But it didn't have that legitimacy until Bruno was in it. Once Bruno was in it, then it's like, all right, now it's right. That person should have been in there. But that was, Bruno. I mean, he was that hero to people, and
that was
legitimately cool. Was the hero of pretty much the entire Italian community,
right.
and more. But I mean, that was his role. He was that larger than life working man's champion, and man, it's great to hear that when people's heroes stand up.
Oh yeah,
like when the quality, which is what Rich was referring to, where his hero as a kid didn't stand up. It's rough.
Yeah, that moment happened like months before he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and so it was really cool. And then when I found out that Bruno was being inducted, I told my dad, and he goes, "We're going." And we went and we made the pilgrimage to Madison Square Garden. I had never been to Madison Square Garden. I had performed the night before across the street from Madison Square Garden, but I had never actually been to Madison Square Garden. And I think my dad had been there once before, but this was like making the pilgrimage to see that moment was the greatest thing
especially
ever.
Full circle for your dad as far as a kid. The kid in him watched this, then meets his hero, and then to be present to see that huge moment.
My dad doesn't go to anything.
No,
he went to that, and that was so cool.
Although I do recall him being at an ROH taping in Baltimore.
All right, we don't need to go there.
Where he was just Sonny Goodspeed
may or may not innuendo.
May or may not have taken a picture of him out cold in the stands.
He wasn't. He was cold. He wasn't out cold.
It looked like classic was out cold.
He was a victim of
Dunzo.
circumstance.
Yeah, victim of circumstance. No, that's I love these stories. It's like the stuff that when you hear about just people like for me. So it was Hulk Hogan that got me into watching wrestling, and then roughly between WrestleMania 1 and WrestleMania 2, that's when the British Bulldogs really became present, and Ricky Steamboat came, and that was where I enjoyed watching. I liked the guys who were wrestling for the Intercontinental title. I loved the tag teams. So my favorite wrestlers heading into that era were Ricky Steamboat and the British Bulldogs. And so years later, I would find myself in a place where I actually got to spend considerable amount of time with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, including being in the ring with him, in a training facility, getting to spend some one-on-one time talking with him. And again, one of those childhood heroes who completely stood up. Just was like first-class human being, really just a great guy. So like nothing better than when your idols as a child stand up. But
You were taking the arm drags?
I did take arm drags.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I was. That was my. We were basically having a Q&A after we did a training session at the school we were running at the time, and he was there. We had a bunch of guys from Bob Evans a few guys from Slam Tech came down, and then we had some of our students. And so Chris Venom and I had been paired up. So we worked a singles match earlier in the day, and then we worked with a couple students in a tag team match. And we got done. We did like a Q&A. So if anybody had questions, and so I was just like, Rick, we've had you here before. We had you here for a week, last year, and you're back. And I'm going to go ahead. Can I take an arm drag? And he says no. I'm like, He goes, we're going to do a spot. So basically, he didn't want to just do an arm drag. So he puts me in a headlock. We did the whole, I put him in a headlock. He shoots me off. I give him a shoulder tackle. I come off the ropes. I forgot how he leapfrogged me. I came off, something like that. And then it was arm drag, arm drag, arm drag. And then he locked it up. And like he finishes it. And like the students who were there, like our students, they all popped because it came out good. We did it. It looked good. And I came up and like, I just took 3 arm drags from Rick Steamboat.
Right.
And my first response was to pop up, and I gave him a huge hug. I've got it on video somewhere. I take 3 arm drags, then I pop up and give him this big old hug. Yeah. And
it's like a kid. It's like a kid in the old days growing up a baseball fan, getting to play catch with like Reggie Jackson or something. Yeah. It's like insane.
Yeah, it totally. It's exactly what it is. That's like whenever you do the show with the legend, and you all argue over who would take the claw from Killer Kowalski. Killer could barely get in the ring, but we'd be fighting over who got to take the. I'll put no. You did it last time. I'm taking the claw.
It's so cool that you brought up the Kowalski thing because I have a similar story. I think this was either 2003 or 2004, but very similar situation. My dad takes me to a wrestling. So there's a wrestling show like in the middle of my hometown, ironically enough. And it was Killer Kowalski's All-Star Wrestling. Yeah. And it was just a one-off. Never had another show at the high school, but I distinctly remember these individuals being on the card. They were Nikki Rocks. They were Brian Fury, Eddie Edwards, and DC Dillinger. Those are the names I remember on that card that day, and I just was like, wow. And I remember Dave was I don't know if Dave actually wrestled on that show, but he was there. But I just remember approaching him as a little kid, and he gave me that look, like that. What do you want, kid? Giving me crap even then.
Little did you know, years later you'd be having a lampshade on your head, going down the streets of Plymouth trying to find Crazy Glue. I know I mixed four stories together, but.
Put this lampshade on your head and run outside and run over to his door and pound on it. Do it.
Meanwhile, on the other side of that door.
I wish we could tell that story. But
oh, man. And then to see Al Snow and Paul Richards the next morning when that chair collapsed.
All you have to do is, like... I don't know Al Snow, really, but all you have to do is go on Twitter and just send him wicker chair, and he will remember it instantly and will send back an LOL.
I'll never forget Paul Richards saying, hey, maybe they have security cameras. Maybe we could ask them for the footage.
That was like the ultimate Bigfoot sighting story in all of wrestling. It's like if you were there and saw it, you know it, but if you tell it the right way, it's the best story ever.
In essence, it was a large woman on a wicker chair that collapsed. But just to see it happen, like you could hear from a mile away the chair groaning. Like it's like that chair's about to give up.
Ouch!
If that
Cherry.
chair if that chair was Fred Sanford, it would be like, I'm coming. This is the big one. Oh man.
That whole weekend was great.
Tremendous.
I mean, some parts of it were no bueno, but the outside stuff was quite bueno.
That was the first weekend we really got to hang out with the Blue Meanie and his girlfriend Tracy, who's an amazing. They're both amazing people. It's so seeing them and watching. Seeing little Guido and Joe Moderato sitting watching cooking shows together.
It's like a mirror image.
I know, right? And that, it's funny. So just to put it, this was we had run a couple shows under the NECW banner in Plymouth, and it was right around Thanksgiving.
Plymouth and Somerset, yeah.
And so early, so the whole thing is we'd run the show the night before, and then so that was like a Friday. So it's Saturday morning. And we're going to then head and do the show later in the day in Somerset. But we're in Plymouth, and it's like right around Thanksgiving. And so Al Snow suddenly decides he wants to go see – we're in Plymouth. He wants to go see Plymouth Rock and see the Mayflower too. So it was really cold that morning.
Yeah, it was really cold.
But like here – this is just like – this is wrestling. All of a sudden it's like I forget who went, but I know I was there. Sheldon Goldberg was there. Al Snow. And like we all like go like – we're frozen, like we're all like shivering, but we're all standing there looking at Plymouth Rock and the Mayflower too, and like, wow, this is like right after Thanksgiving, and we're here. But on the outside, you're like, this is so bizarre. I'm here with Al Snow, what does everybody want? The Mayflower, the head. It's just ridiculous.
Brother, that's Plymouth Rock.
Yeah, Paul was definitely there. Yeah, just
Tremendous.
crazy the way things like that go. So we've been sort of throwing it in, but. When you were a fan, what are some of the matches that just stick out? Like, as far as when you were a fan, matches that just before you got involved. That I mean, obviously everybody says Savage and Steamboat. Yeah. That's one of those.
But that was like
But that was before your time.
For me, that was later on, like going back,
getting the Coliseum home videotape. Yeah.
But Brett and Owen at WrestleMania 10. I mean, to this day, is my favorite match of all time.
That stands up.
Even
Watch
as a
it now,
kid,
it stands up.
Still
it's a great match.
Yep.
Yeah.
Even as a kid, you know that it was a special thing. A 9-year-old kid not knowing anything about wrestling, I knew that it was a special match. And again, all these years later, it's still my favorite match. Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, that whole feud, not just the ladder match that people seem to only remember, but the whole feud of it, the two different titles.
Right.
Shawn Michaels claiming he's the real Intercontinental Champion. Razor Ramon not having any of that.
Yeah.
They bring in the other belt, which led to the ladder match.
And just that, seeing two Intercontinental title belts was like, what? There's two belts?
And
That's
then,
crazy.
incorporating guys like IRS into that mix.
Yeah.
The IRS and Razor had a great match at that Rumble in Providence that same night.
I think that's one of those things that, unfortunately, with the IRS. I mean, IRS was great.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes people just think IRS and forget that Mike Rotundo was like legit, huge, awesome collegiate wrestler.
Yeah.
And even before that, had a great history as wrestler. So the IRS, they sort of did some of the sticky stuff with him, but he was like awesome. I think even though, people accepted I think he was kind of underrated. Like
super underrated. I mean, he was, for a while there, because it was kind of a downtime in the business, was one of the higher end heels in the company too. Once DiBiase was gone,
right.
It didn't last very long. He ended up going back to WCW, if I'm not mistaken.
Michael Wall Street.
Yeah, right. But yeah, he's very he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Money Inc. was a great tag team.
Right, and they were serious. It wasn't a joke. It was serious.
No, they put them together at first because it was like, all right, it was one of those. But you thought about it. You had the $1 Million Man, who was, and then his this is my accountant, IRS.
Made perfect sense.
But
and then they did the $1 Million Corporation, which was a really big part of WrestleMania.
But those two guys were like two of the best wrestlers. Like could go in there with anybody, have a great match.
Yep.
But back then I didn't really. But I look back and I was like, man, what a good tag team that was. And they were having like solid matches with teams like the Natural Disasters.
Nasty
they would
Boys.
have good matches with them. Not to put in it, but because like Tenta was and Tugboat, where they were both, but it was different levels of. They were solid guys, they were good, but they weren't like they weren't DiBiase, Rotundo good.
It wasn't technically sound good.
And that's the thing. They were doing that whole, hey, we can work with these giant brawlers. We can work, the Nasty Boys were brawlers. They weren't technical at all.
Matter of fact, I just was going back on the network and watching all the old superstars that they have on there, and they saw the episode where they were running the angle where Jimmy Hart was managing simultaneously the Nasty Boys and Money Inc. and Natural Disasters were the tag champions. And the cliffhanger for the end of the episode was, who's Jimmy Hart going to choose of his tag teams to go and face the Natural Disasters for the tag titles? And they made you believe, I'm choosing the Nasty Boys, baby.
And that's what turned them babyface, right? He turned them.
As Superstars is going off the air, it cuts to Jimmy Hart in the back, and he's like, I got a surprise for you, Money Inc., baby, Money Inc. And, turned on the Nasty Boys, and that's how the episode ended. Next episode of Superstars, Nasty Boys come out hot. They go over to the commentary table with Vince. They demand, Jimmy Hart comes out and blah, blah, blah. They end up gorilla press slamming Jimmy Hart off the stage onto Money Inc. And, Money Inc. takes the titles from Natural Disasters, moves them out, and now you have the Nasties and Money Inc. Going forward for the pay-per-view, and it was awesome.
What's funny is I literally have no recollection of Jimmy Hart managing Money Inc.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It just doesn't click for me. That does to me. I'm sure it did. It just doesn't feel like they even needed it. I mean,
they definitely didn't, but it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. He was good
but
at it.
I remember his badass Money Inc. jacket.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
so cool.
Okay.
Yep.
I loved when he started managing the Rougeos and they were the All American Boys.
Yeah.
That stuff. What are All American Boys?
So good.
Good stuff. Caleb, standout matches for you.
I gotta say, the one big match that I definitely remember seeing as a little kid and going, wow, wasn't anything that was great in the ring or anything. It was just that moment where everything kind of really set in as this is a really huge deal, was the night that Hogan came out and dropped the leg on Savage at Bash at the Beach.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the NWO. It was like, wow, because I was a little kid. It was on Saturday nights back then, the pay-per-views. And so I was old enough at that time to be able to stay up until 10 o'clock to watch these pay-per-views. And I saw that whole thing happen, and Hogan, who had been the hero for as long as I could remember, keep my eyes open to be cognizant of what was happening in front of me. Hulk Hogan was the man, and now he's a bad guy. And I was just being a little kid at that time and trying to comprehend that Hogan wasn't being nice to anybody. Hogan's being a bad guy. What is this? And what's going on with Diesel and Razor? What is this? And it was a big deal for little Caleb, and thus the real addiction started. And I was anything I could watch, man. It was wrestling, and that was definitely the moment I felt that, at least that I can distinctly remember, my oldest memory.
So where did you guys find independent wrestling? How did you find it? Where did you find it? Like, where did that come from? I mean, obviously, you brought up Caleb the Killer Kowalski's All-Star
I didn't
Wrestling.
even know what that was. Yeah.
Like, it wasn't it was just wrestling. But like, when did you become sort of aware that there was wrestling other than WWF wrestling, and that it was accessible?
When I found you guys, I stumbled into you.
Really?
Yeah, I lived about 15 minutes away from the Armory. So
this is what year would that be?
2000s, end of 2006.
At the Quincy Armory.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Massachusetts.
It was DC Dillinger against Evan Six for the title in Quincy. It was
So
like
we
a
were
street
running-
fight thing in October.
We were running, again, at the time, under the NECW banner. We were running monthly events. We'd originally run events there as PWF Northeast. Then we did a merger with NECW, so we were running events there every month. So how many... Now, I remember at one point, so you'd started coming to shows, and you had aspired to be an announcer at some point.
I don't even think I was there yet. I don't think I was at that point in my life yet where I even wanted to be an announcer.
But at some point, and again, the timelines blur, but at some point, you sent a demo.
That was probably later, but I remember
But it was
going
before
to
it was before you were helping us on the ring or anything.
maybe, or I had written a writing sample to Sheldon, maybe.
But there was definitely we had gotten something, because I remember Kyle and I hearing, and like, this is like a 16-year-old kid. This sounds good. And we were even then saying, hey, there's probably some stuff we could, let's give the kid.
That might have been a little bit later down the road, but I
know.
distinctly remember going to Sheldon after seeing that first show in October, knowing, okay, wrestling exists around here, and it's called independent wrestling. Like, I didn't know it was independent wrestling. I just knew it was wrestling. It was 15 minutes away. It had a house. You guys had the old video screen and the curtains set up, but you had the pony ring at the time. But it was still, these guys were looking legit. And I was like, I was 15. I was kind of aimless at the time. I didn't have anything really to sink my teeth into. I didn't have any hobbies. I didn't have anything that I like extracurricular activities after school. I didn't have anything at the time. But I did have aspirations, I guess, in some way, shape, or form of being in the business. So I remember coming to the next show. And looking back, it's ridiculous, but I remember coming to the next show dressed up in a slacks and shirt and going up to Sheldon and asking if I could have his business card, if I could talk to him, and he thought I was 18. He thought I was older. He thought I was an older guy, and I remember being on the phone with him like about 2 days later. He asked me how old I was, and I said I just turned 15 2 weeks ago, and there was this distinct like silence on the phone for like 5-6 seconds, where Sheldon just says, "You're kidding me," and he said, "Well."
Yeah.
Fred Norris here.
That was awesome. I didn't know we do that now.
We don't too often, but
well timed. But he invited me back, and it's been ever since, man. Here I am.
And it's funny because there was so typically when guys would come up and say, "Hey, this is like what I'd like to do. I'd like to be involved." Our first piece was always, "Well, great. We show up at." Yeah. For an 8 o'clock event, we're there at noon or 2 o'clock. Show up and help us unload the ring. And unloading the ring is typically one of the most thankless. Doing production setup is not something that's full of glamour. It's dirty, it's heavy, it's tiring. But we used to get people on board, and you would see people who were so gung ho to do stuff, who would show up once or twice. And we had a great ring crew. We had, JP and Ref Rob Tuttle, and we had a whole bunch of different guys. We had, the Kelly, Papa
Nee.
Kelly, Big Joe Nee would show up. So we had a great crew. Evan Six would run.
Big Nuts.
Big Nut Steve. We had a bunch of different, and these are all like people who just sort of came together, and that was for many of them. Whereas Rob Tuttle would head ring crews up later on. He was a referee, so he would be in the ring. But most of the guys, other than maybe acting as security, most of them had no other connection to the wrestling business. But yet they became part of the whole family of what we did. And so Caleb shows up and 15, 16 years old and trying to join in with but rubbed us so wrong at first. It was like, ugh. And he was just in the way. And I remember just Kyle being like, you know what, Sheldon, tell Caleb that he needs to go and grow up a little bit and then he can come back. And it was like a couple months off just to give us a break from you. But then you came back, and ever since then it was like, oh yeah, Caleb's just part of the gang.
Yeah, it was just, I got to thank you guys, because you guys, I really credit you guys for sticking with me and giving me this opportunity to grow into who I have become, because I was really man. But before I met you guys, I was legitimately aimless in life. I was not doing very well at all. It was very concerning, and I was just looking for a place. I was looking for people that I could relate to. I was really looking for a friend, and I didn't have any close siblings. I didn't have any close best friends, I could really say. But once I found something that I really loved and I really wanted to be a part of, it was frustrating for me to get out of my own way, for me to really either mature, I don't know if that's the word, but to just get it, to just be comfortable in my own skin and to be comfortable being who I was and who I am. And you guys, you saw something in me. You were able to, not write me off. You were just like, hey, you know what? There's something to this kid, and let's keep having him in our house. And yeah, once I found my way, you guys just became the biggest part of my life, and to this day, you guys are my best friends in the world. So, without you guys, I wouldn't have the life that I have now, and I wouldn't be where I am now if it wasn't for you guys taking that chance on me, because it wouldn't have happened anywhere else, guaranteed.
And a few years later in Quincy, we'd have another, a 13-year-old show up,
right,
who was all sorts of gung-ho about being a filmmaker and wanting to be a part of wrestling, and anything you need me to do, I'll do. And again, it was like that little chihuahua, and it's like, come on, just leave me alone. I'll give you something to do to get out of, to get out of my hair. But that was Anthony Green,
Right.
And now he's like traveling all over the United States, killing it as the retrosexual. You know what I'm saying? Like last night, he cut Brian Fury's hair.
Yep.
Cut all his hair off last night in ring. So
I went from hating that kid to
Yeah,
just saying
no.
this kid is he's gonna be something one day.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it's just it's great to see guys who you were able to meet at that age and kind of watch them grow up and grow into the wrestling business and find their identities and become go from being boys to growing into being men and developing, and it's super cool.
Yep.
So Rich, independent wrestling, obviously
man.
Yankee Pro Wrestling.
Yep. So I grew up in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and that's where Yankee Pro Wrestling, now Top Rope Promotions, was based out of. And as you know, Joe Eugenio was really good at promoting. He would, and I don't think it's as acceptable now, but he used to paper the towns with posters and flyers, and just you could go to any random convenience store and there'd be a stack of tickets on the front counter. Bring this and you get a $2 admission or something like that.
Right,
And,
discounted general admission.
so I used to save the posters, and I don't know where they are now. Maybe my grandmother's basement. There's a stack of old Yankee posters of shows that I went to as a kid, and Cogsall Street down in New Bedford, and Stargazers, which was a club, were the two places that I would regularly go to. And then I started making the trip to Fall River, to the PAL, and seeing shows out there. But just getting to sit up close and see guys who I saw on TV just the week before, because now at this point in my life I'm watching Saturday morning WWF Mania and Superstars and Wrestling Challenge and all this stuff that's on in the mornings now. And I remember seeing Phil Apollo, who was just a job guy,
But he was the booker then. He was backstage.
he was wrestling on the Yankee shows.
And it was him and Scott Taylor. PJ Walker.
But local guys that just incredible.
Yeah.
But local guys that stuck out to me, seeing them as a kid, was Rick Fuller and Brickhouse Baker and guys like that. I remember specifically, and I got to say, my mom would bring me to these, and she wasn't a wrestling fan. And then later on, my stepfather, I would find out, was friends with Colossus.
We talked about Colossus last week with
so
Brickhouse.
I had a birthday party. There's a picture of me floating around the internet somewhere at a birthday party when I was a little kid. Opening the front door, they had set it up where Colossus was going to come to my birthday party. Now, mind you, I'm 9, and I don't know this guy from a hole in the wall.
Right.
I just know that he's a big, badass, scary dude, 6'8", giant man. And I opened the front door, and there's Colossus standing there, holy crap. Come to find out, he was friends with my stepfather, and they had set the whole thing up. But without those shows, I would have never, because that's where I started. That's where I got interested, and later on found out that I can start going to training and, figure this stuff out and be a part of it. But Brickhouse Baker, I don't remember who he was wrestling, but this venue, Stargazers, was different. It was very unique. They had tables that you could sit at. So they had the regular folding chairs, but then they also had these round wooden tables that families could sit at or whatever. They had a bar and snacks and stuff. So I remember sitting at this table with my mom and my stepfather, and I had my snacks all out on the table, sodas, airheads, the whole nine. And Brickhouse Baker gets pitched over the barricade and quite literally into our table and knocked everything off the table, and my soda, my candy, the whole thing. And I remember maybe 10, 11 years old, standing up and giving Brickhouse so much heat for knocking all of my snacks and stuff over, just you've seen a little kid go off at a show and whatever, and that was me just going into him. And
that's awesome.
I just remember him reacting holy crap, what, selling off me, and then going back and getting back into the ring and so on. But just, these moments that you have, people who are fans, these moments that you have, you're going to remember them for the rest of your life. These were things that happened for me 20 years ago, and I still remember them like they happened to me yesterday, and to go on and to be able to train with Brickhouse and learn from him and all the other guys from Yankee Pro back at that time, the Nick Steeles, the Johnny Angels, the guys that I grew up watching who taught me, and now I'm able to pass that on to the younger guys. That's just the coolest part of independent wrestling if you're a fan, because it's so up close, so intimate, and you can just be a part of everything. And who knows years later where that's going to be for today's fans. You'll be listening to somebody else telling the same exact type of story that we're telling now of what independent wrestling has done for them. And yeah, man.
That was cool. Like when we had Tony P in a couple months ago now, and hearing him talk about how he got started, and it's very like, like you said, like he because of going the right way about it again, he got into it a lot quicker as far as working with the talent that he does.
Right.
But like you said, a guy who was a fan of wrestling and initially was going to wrestle and then was like, no, I'm not big enough for this, but I can ref. And what a great choice. Now he's like one of the best refs in the area.
And I think that's why me and Tony get along so well, because we basically had the exact same start. Like, I started and trained to wrestle, but I'm 5'7".
Yeah.
If my goal when I first started was to get on TV, and that was never going to happen as a wrestler. There's only one Rey Mysterio, and this was, 17 years ago, so it was before the times of the 150-pound, 5'7" guy getting on television. That didn't exist when I started. So different times, but training as a wrestler for me and Tony definitely gives us a different perspective on what we're able to do as referees, because we have almost that wrestler mentality, so we know what needs to be done and everything. So that part of that was from being a fan, because we weren't like, I got to train to referee because we got to train to wrestle because that was what we were seeing at indie shows. And
throw back to the Quincy thing, because we're talking about referees. Another one of our very regular fans every month was Kevin Quinn.
Right. Yep.
Kevin Quinn would bring his son Matty to the shows, and every time Scott Osborne would come out or Brandon Locke, he'd be showing his guns off, flexing at them, trying to and Paul Rich, did you see the muscle guy? He was the guy Kevin. He was flexing every time. We gotta highlight that when we're shooting that, so people can see that rivalry. And Kevin, yeah, but it was and even though he was giving them heat, he was actually the biggest Brandon Locke fan there was. And ultimately then links up with Rich and and now Kevin has been, he's reffed matches between like Cody Rhodes and Kurt Angle in a cage. He's been,
it's crazy.
He's reffed some really amazing Kenny Omega matches. He's reffed.
He's like the Diamond Dallas Page of referees.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
What's funny though is there's so many guys who, unfortunately, due to the way much of indie wrestling has been, who are his age or older, who have gotten the opportunity to, in quotes, be a referee. And we've all dealt with them where it's just, oh man, that guy, like they're immobile. He is a guy who's done it right. He started late in it, but he's great. He's not one of those S-bag refs as we would,
Exactly.
So if you tune in just now, it's you're listening to the Pier 6 Roundtable, the three amigos back in the saddle. Caleb Seltzer joining us. 101.1 FM, WBRULP, WFOOLP, WVVXLP Providence, streaming online at bsrlive.com.
That's a mouthful.
It is Brown Student Community Radio, serving the curious listeners. What we're doing is we're sort of doing our usual interview segment that we do with our guests, but we're switching it up, and we're kind of talking internally about what got us to the dance, if you will, what got us liking wrestling, what got us involved in the business. So we were just talking about independent wrestling, what kind of made us aware of independent wrestling, kind of how we got involved. So now we're all at a point where, where we're getting involved. So, Rich, you'd become a fan of Top Rope. Like you said, you knew you weren't going to be on TV, so you're gonna referee. So who are some of the guys in your early training that people would now know who are fans of wrestling?
Who's left?
Yeah.
Most notably, obviously, Mike Bennett, Mike Kanellis. I think he might have started 3 months before me, and we're the same age, so we really connected and got along well. Teddy Goods, who was there probably 6 months, maybe 10 months before I got there. Brandon Webb, the Devil's Reject, he's still around. Next week's guest, Ryan Drew, he probably started a little bit after I did too. Thrill Ride Jimmy Preston initially had started back around that time and then took some time off. Yeah.
And Teddy Goods, he's another name that comes up. I mean, he was 12 years old, 13 years old, coming to Top Rope shows when we were there, when it was Yankee Pro, and, harassing. We became quick friends with him as far as we used to call him the Piranha, because he was this little kid who just he didn't care. He would say like the most horrible things to and it didn't matter if somebody was a babyface and he thought you sucked.
Yeah,
he was going to scream stuff at you that was just like, wow, holy cow,
filthy child.
Yeah, and then he when we started the Mayhem Independent Wrestling, he would come to the Mayhem shows, and one of my memories was he was at one of the shows. We talked about it. He was at one of the shows on his birthday, and somewhere along the line, it became something that it's his birthday. The Hit Squad, which was Danny Moff and Monster Mac, we're going to give him birthday chops. So here's Teddy at probably 14 or 15 getting chopped by the friggin' by the Hit Squad.
You can't even do that nowadays.
No.
God, that today. That's funny.
So Caleb, you started coming along to the shows, started kind of, I guess you could say you started kind of as a PA, like a production assistant, but then
a young ward.
So you were the virtual Dick Grayson of NECW, and so where was it that obviously a defining moment kind of in your time there was Genesis
9?
Was it Genesis? Yeah,
8.
Genesis 8, when Sheldon Goldberg, who was the lead announcer, was sick that night, was unable to do commentary for the show, wasn't even at the event, and we called an audible and had you run play-by-play with Joe Matarazzo, and basically that night, from everybody who heard it, rave reviews.
I was on I think I was on one of my first dates with my now fiance when I got that call from you.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and you had said, "Hey, kid," you left a message saying, "Oh, look at you, you're too busy, you can't pick up your phone." Well, I just want to
me.
yeah. I just want to let you know that you got to bring your working shoes tonight because you're calling the show. Sheldon's sick, and so I'm like, okay, I just finished dropping her off where she was going to, and now I got to go down to Somerset, I think it was, or Pembroke, where we were going to be doing Genesis.
Yeah, I think it was Pembroke.
No plans, no preparation for what was to come, and it was Joe Matarazzo and I on the call that night.
It was February because it was my birthday. I remember that now.
Yep.
That you mentioned Genesis and Pembroke because it was my birthday.
And it was so cold that night that I went to open, or Mark Billy went to open the side door of the ring truck, and literally the handle of the ring truck just disintegrated because it was that cold. It was ridiculous. It was like one of those crazy polar vortexes. But
it was one of those ridiculous circumstances where we left the Armory and we did Genesis in Pembroke.
Yeah,
but
it had a good crowd.
It was a really good crowd. Yeah.
Well, that's because Joe was from around.
I think he was.
He was. Yeah. So
that was the night Pat Piper was wasted in the ring for the interview with Warbeard,
and Warbeard's literally going to you and saying, He's
drunk. He's wasted. I can smell him from here. He stinks.
He's totally ruining the whole. He's screwing the whole thing up. But
that was that night.
It's funny because it sort of was when we looked at the relationships of the vocal ownership. See, there were 4 owners at that time of NECW. It was myself, Kyle White, Sheldon Goldberg, and Roy Rossi. Roy was very vocal on the business end of things, but as far as the wrestling end of things, he wasn't involved.
You wouldn't have known he was there.
Yeah. So this is sort of one of those times where people who are in the know, this night, where it was your first real night calling a full event, really in the long run kind of was one of the defining moments in what led to the dissolving of that partnership. We got done with the show. Everybody from Soup to Nuts had heard. We had the call because we had it set up where you could watch.
Yeah, it was the first time we had ever done that. I think,
Brian
right?
Nato, who was producing our video, had a full production suite in the back. You could see and hear everything It was awesome, and everybody agreed that you nailed it. I mean, this kid came in with no preparation really, and
I think I was 17, right?
Yeah. And in no short order pulled it together and led a broadcast. and Joe gave you a huge hug after, said it was a blast to work with you, and the first thing, we were telling Sheldon it was great, and he wanted to hear it. He wanted to, and we got it to Sheldon. Sheldon didn't like it.
Yeah,
and
it wasn't like I want to hear it in the way you want to hear someone say, "Oh, I want to hear that." It wasn't like, "Oh, I really want to hear that." It was, "I want to hear that."
Yeah,
and I want to hear it. So no matter how good it is, I'm going to take a crap on it because this kid's not going to take my spot.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, if he was threatened, and again, I'm not using this story I'm not trying to put any shine on anybody here, but like. And then Joe suddenly then agreed, well, it wasn't that good. I wasn't really that and it was like, wait, this is and ultimately that, we started advocating for Caleb to have more. So if there were pre-show matches, or we're going to do like some tapings for, right. and Sheldon wouldn't argue with that, but he didn't want to have, he didn't want to give. So we were at one of the events. It ended up that Joe Moderazzo
broke his arm.
He had a spot that he called where he was going to. It was his idea, but he wanted Brandon Locke to give him the lockdown. And he set this whole thing up and he ended up like injuring his shoulder, like severely injuring his shoulder
in front of his wife and his kids.
And so he ends up, so he ends up leaving, going to the hospital. Now we have no play-by-play guy, and so our first thought is send Caleb out there, and Sheldon was like adamant, no, it wasn't going to happen.
I want to do it myself.
But that became one of those things where we just started feeling that, if you're looking out for what's best for the company, you're not going to put yourself in that position where you're not willing to work with young talent. And anyway, when we went on and we started PWF, Caleb was our lead broadcaster because that was what we believed in. And ultimately, he basically made his own opportunities and got to spend a few weeks on national TV as the color guy with Ring of Honor.
2 months, yeah. Right?
And I know
5.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So I know you look back and
ridiculous.
Wish you were more prepared, like professionally for that.
I had no business being in that position.
But at the same time, I mean, you definitely had a run,
Yeah. Yep.
And
I lived a dream. I got to say I did it. I got to say I got to be on national television. I got to be on worldwide pay-per-view. I got to, perform at the Hammerstein Ballroom across from Madison Square Garden. I got to work with Jim Cornette. I got to work with literally all this stuff that happened in that 5-month window is enough for most people in a career.
And basically, when he was there, the top guys were like Sami Zayn as El Generico. Kevin Steen, Kevin Owens.
That's the defining match. That ladder war match, Generico and Steen. The last time those guys ever had a match in Ring of Honor was at the biggest event in, imagine this. Okay. I guess I should tell that story. So I'm in community college at the time. I'm just doing little things for Ring of Honor at the time. I had made my own opportunity when I had gone down to a television taping in Baltimore. There was a dark match. Nobody was calling it. They were set up for TV. I just went up to Delirious. I just said, hey, is anybody calling the dark match? And he goes, no. And I said, can I do it? And he goes, you know what? Yeah, I want that.
Now, preface that really quickly though. When they did an pay-per-view it was pay-per-view in Providence.
Yeah, that's right.
And they brought you in and you got to call the local match.
Yeah, Kevin Kelly gave me that opportunity where he said, yeah, hey kids, sell me some tickets, I'll put you on the show. Very much that similar situation where it's like, hey, sell me some tickets.
But you called the match with a bunch of so you had already done one match, so Delirious knew who you were.
Yeah. Those guys knew who I was, and Kevin Kelly, he was definitely an advocate of mine at the time, and he called me and he said, "Hey, yeah, you should start coming to TVs, all that stuff." So I started doing that, and I just remember Hunter Delirious was all over the place that day. You couldn't get him for more than 5 seconds. He's being pulled in a million different directions. I just remember working up the gumption to run up to him and just say, Hunter, do you have a second? And I remember him saying, I don't, but yeah, go. And I said, can I call the dark match? And yeah, he let me do it. And I remember going out there and in front of a live house, sitting in the broadcast booth. I didn't have a color person. It was just me sitting there. And I remember putting the headphones on, and I'll never forget the voice coming into my headset was Jim Cornette going, okay, Caleb, this is what we're going to do. And he started producing me in my headset, and he told me just a couple things just to say, and he laid out for the entire 6-minute segment. It was a Veda Scott match. I forget who she wrestled. I apologize. But I remember doing the match, and I remember driving home with Bob Evans. And the biggest part of the story that I left out is that the entire 6.5 hour drive from Massachusetts to Baltimore was Bob Evans cutting a huge promo on me for 6 hours about how I don't take the business seriously enough, and how I don't take myself seriously enough, and how I need to be more assertive and do this, and this if I want to get anywhere. And then I remember we're driving, and we're almost out of Baltimore. We stopped for gas, and he's going on about something on the show, and I turned to him, I go, I called the dark match tonight. He goes, what? Wait a minute. What? You called the dark match? He had no clue that I did that. And he goes, that's awesome. Oh my God, I'm so proud of you. But he was really proud of me for that. And I remember getting a call 3 days later in one of my classes. It was Kevin Kelly, and he was at work at the time, so he was talking really quiet. He goes, hey, I just want to tell you, Jim thought you did a really, really good job in Baltimore, and he wants to start bringing you on the road and doing the DVDs and all the extra stuff for the company. He definitely, Cornette wanted me to be the understudy announcer. He wanted me to be the what Future of Honor is now. That didn't exist then, but that was in the back of their minds. That's kind of where they wanted to go with it. Was they wanted to start a developmental system where they wanted a farm system for not just the wrestlers but for referees and announcers. And Cornette's idea was to make me how Sean Mooney would be doing the Coliseum videos. I wouldn't be the one on TV. I would be the guy that would go to all the house shows, all the shows that weren't on Honor Club because that didn't exist, and they would just do DVDs, and they would have me be the announcer on those DVDs, and just that would be my way of working my way up and getting more experience before I was ready for TV. What happened was Ring of Honor was supposed to, they were in the process of hiring Adam Pearce to be their commentator with Kevin Kelly, because I guess internally at the time when Nigel was doing the commentary with Kevin Kelly, they were a really good team, and that was Nigel's first ever commentary gig. And so the fans, of course, they loved him. Anything Nigel did was great. But for whatever reason, internally within Sinclair, I guess they was just they were either looking at their ratings, or they were doing polls, stuff like that. They were focus groups asking different people what they thought of the Ring of Honor show. And because, I guess Sinclair was a Southern based, organization, whatever, they just couldn't understand the connection of an English guy on a wrestling broadcast. And I guess for whatever reason, they decided that, okay, we're going to move Nigel out of commentary, and we're going to make him the commissioner or whatever character he was, where he was the authority figure. And they wanted to hire Adam Pearce to be the commentator, and they were going to shoot that at Final Battle. They were building up to this big reveal that Adam Pearce was going to be the commentator, and they had some sort of a contractual dispute, an internal dispute with one of the people that worked there that I guess had a problem with Adam Pearce the last time he was there. And because Sinclair Broadcasting is this corporate entity and all that stuff, it wasn't like Ring of Honor Wrestling, which was just an independent property at the time when it happened. It's now owned by this major conglomerate, and so this guy cried foul and said, I'll pretty much sue you if you hire Adam Pearce. And so they literally had the rug pulled out from under them the week of Final Battle, and they needed somebody to replace. They just built up, there was going to be there was going to be a new commentator, and they just had huge egg on their faces. And they said, well, what are we going to do? Well, here I am, same situation, sitting in my community college classroom. I get a phone call, and it's Delirious. And he said, hey, are you coming to Final Battle? And I said, yes. He goes, yeah, exactly, Pete. And he said, are you coming? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, you're working the pay-per-view now. We need you. I'm like, what? So that's if you the only way I can equate this is if you're whoever the like Todd Phillips, I guess. If he's Todd Phillips and Michael Cole is not calling WrestleMania, it's for whatever reason Michael Cole can't make it to WrestleMania, we need you to be the voice of WrestleMania. That's exactly what that was with Kevin Kelly on commentary. And that was an absolute no-win situation. I can actually nail that. That is definitely where my career, where it was supposed to go up, that's where I can pinpoint that's where my career ended. Because I had absolutely no business being in the position of replacing the most beloved figure in the history of Ring of Honor. I am now this kid, literally green as grass, has never been on TV before, no experience on a major platform at all. He's the new color commentator of Ring of Honor, replacing Nigel McGuinness.
Yeah.
that was the most insane. Just looking back in hindsight, that's the most insane decision I think anybody could have made at the time.
Now, do you think? And this is just as they say that we're just freestyling here.
Oh yeah, we're calling it.
Yeah, but do you think that if Cornette had not had his separation from them and stayed as a part,
he was my net.
Yeah,
absolutely, because he had his meltdown the week before.
Yeah, do you think he would have? He probably, first of all, wouldn't put you in that position. Right. He would have left. So, I mean, if that happened, I mean, again, you very well could be in the Ian Riccaboni role right now.
Yeah, well,
because I mean, you were Cornette's guy.
I was given too much too soon. Like you said, it just goes back to just I didn't know how to handle the opportunity I was given at the time. I didn't have the ability to, think like that then. I definitely felt like I earned that opportunity, and I was thankful for it. But looking back, man, I just had no business being there. Like if I was, in that position where creatively, where you say, who am I going with? I'm putting Prince Nana in that spot. I'm putting any wrestler that any Ring of Honor fan would recognize. Steve Corino was there. The plan was for Steve to inevitably be the commentator down the road. It happened after 5 months, but 5 months.
Yeah.
5 months on TV. It wasn't like I was doing that good of a job. I don't feel, but to the credit of production guys like Dan Bynum and Kevin Kelly and all these other guys that were really that were pulling for me and were supporters of mine. Really, it just I can't to this day even go back and watch any of my old stuff. I had some moments that were good, but they were signs of okay, there might be something there. It wasn't like, wow, this guy's great. Because I wasn't a color commentator. I was a play-by-play guy.
Exactly.
What am I doing?
Right.
What am I doing with Kevin Kelly on television for 5 months? It was ridiculous looking back. But I just remember being, showing up to that same WrestleMania weekend with the Bruno Hall of Fame thing. Ring of Honor was running the All-Star Extravaganza, whatever it was. And that was my write-off during that 10-man tag where
and you actually were written off. It wasn't just
I got killed off literally,
did.
And that was it. End of my run. I've never had another moment ever outside of that thing in Baltimore that you and I did with the Hardys. That was the last time I ever appeared on any sort of a television broadcast. But my last real shot as an announcer was that night, and I remember that week I had gotten an email from Steve Corino. And because we knew we were going to do the spot where we were going to be killed off, they were going to kill me off. And just, it's so surreal getting a Facebook message from Steve Corino that says, hey, are you cool with taking a fireball? The original idea was that they were going to throw a fireball in my face at the pay-per-view.
Makes sense.
And I was like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But then they thought better of it because they were going to do the thing with Steen a couple months later. And so they said, we'll save that. But I remember... all right, I knew that this was coming. I knew that they were writing me off. And the match was like a 10-man tag thing with Scum, whatever the faction that Steve Corino was leading with different guys. I know Rhino was in it. So I was thinking, okay, if we were going to do this, and I started to, figure out what the Ring of Honor fans hated me. I'll never forget walking out in Hammerstein Ballroom and just the whole place booing me.
And leading up, they were actually like Meltzer and like Dave Scherer, guys who are like dirt sheet writers, were actually leading up to that. Actually, rumor has it that Caleb Seltzer is going to be written on. Like literally, like that was like wrestling.
I didn't even see that, but that's funny.
No, we talked about it on the show.
Oh
like,
my God.
It was actually like it was wrestling news that you were being written on.
That's
You're going to be replaced soon.
But I just remember this. I knew this was coming, and I remember writing to Hunter, like, hey, like, what if Rhino gored me? I would have done that. I think the place would have absolutely lost their minds if somehow, some way, because the spot was Corino is going to stand up because we were all on commentary together. I was going to say something inflammatory to Steve, and Steve was going to get aggravated with me. He was going to slap me in the head, and something was going to happen. I was going to be taken out from there. So I thought, what if Steve, because the whole spot was going to be everybody gets scattered off. There was a major, schmoz where everybody takes a spot and everybody's laid out, and so the only thing that would be left to happen where people would actually pay attention to it would be the interaction with me and Steve on the floor. So it's a spot for me and him. So I'm thinking, okay, what if Steve took me and just slapped my headphones off and just threw me in the ring? And I'm a string bean announcer. Like, I shouldn't know my way around a ring. I shouldn't know the environment that's around me once I go in the ring. I shouldn't know what to do. I shouldn't know how to react or how to feel or think. So I figured, what if he throws me into the ring? I get up, I start looking around because I'm in the middle of the Hammerstein Ballroom, like thousands of people staring at me, the
Probably
flashbulbs,
booing the
lights,
hell out of ya.
booing me. I'm out of my element. I don't know what to do. I'm nervous. I'm scared. And what if I just dummy turned right into Terry goring me, Rhino goring me?
That'd be awesome.
And the place would have lost their minds.
They would have.
It would have been a decapitation.
Banana.
It would have looked great. But instead, they just decided to just throw me into the guardrail and like that same spot that everybody else does like a million times a match, and everybody no-sells it and everybody's fine. But you were also again that small announcer, so I did my best to make it look as devastating as possible. I tried to flip myself over, but what really sucks, and I can hear Dan Bynum now in my head, they missed it on TV. They missed the whole thing. They just went wide with it, and they missed. I think they caught the tail end of me flipping over it or something, but you didn't even see the spot, and then they just carried me off, and that was it. And then inevitably, what do? They would put Prince Nana in with Kevin the next day at TV, and he could have been there in that spot the whole damn time. So I'll just.
But I wonder again if that same. I think they may have been worried because, like you said, the Sinclair Brain Trust. We're looking at. Nigel. So
right.
Are you going to go from a guy with his act with the British accent to a guy, Nana's character? He's got his.
It literally could have been
accent,
anybody.
So
I think they ended up doing like a musical chairs thing with the commentary team too. It was like you could have just done that from the start and protected me.
But highlights from that though, 3 words. There it is.
There it is.
There it is. Dan
Bynum still loves that.
And I mean, you got to work some great stuff with Truth Martini on TV. I mean, you guys had a really. I mean, honestly, because he was coming in, every couple of weeks he'd be on sitting in with you guys because of the House of Truth, and you and he actually had some pretty good rapport. So it was always fun when he was the third guy in the announce booth.
Right. I remember, and I always credit Rich with that one when we were bringing up the Punani thing. I was just like, when I heard that, I was like, man, we were just using that phrase, just funny, just us being goofy. And I'm just like, for whatever reason, I felt the need when Truth Martini was trying to come up with something for a promo, I go, you're the Punani Predator. And he heard that. As soon as he heard that, his eyes lit up. And he goes, oh my God, can I use that? That's amazing. And then from there on out in Ring of Honor, he just started, I'm the Punani Predator. And it helped Matt Taven when they married those two on TV and those guys had something. And then all of a sudden that gets incorporated into his theme song and people are getting into that. It was really cool. I just looked at him and go, what if we could take our joke and put it on TV? That would be so cool.
Still around?
No.
He's training, but he doesn't wrestle anymore. He's not around like as a figure anymore, but it was just whatever I could do to take advantage just because I was still a kid. I remember Kevin Kelly telling me like his only advice really to me when we were trying to figure this out, how I was going to get by with this whole role on TV. He goes, you're 19, right? I'm like, yeah. So just be 19. Be a kid, try to incorporate your personality into it and try to make it work. And so I just took our silly jokes on this radio show and us hanging out and just did whatever I could to work them into the broadcast.
And while it went right up Joe Koff's butt, it was great to hear, here it is, national TV, and mentioning PWF Northeast.
Joe Koff hated that. Bring up any other company, it's fine. But it's like, where do these guys come from?
Right.
Where are you getting them?
So for a few, the first few weeks he was on, we get regular, our little indie, we get regular mentions, and we'd have our inside jokes like, oh, Bob Evans, that high-stepping shoe shuffler.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like stuff like that. Like whatever I could do to, pop the boys, quote unquote, which were you two guys. That was the only thing I was really thinking about. And I wish obviously, if you could go back, would I have done all of that different? Yes. The major thing I would have done was say no to the opportunity, just because, if I could just, give younger Caleb advice going back, just don't do it. And I wish I could have really just gone to Jim Cornette and told him to go home that day and not come to Pittsburgh. That would have also been advice I would have gotten. But man, oh man, what a ride. But it's just learning experiences I'll never forget.
And now think about it. You have, and because of your experiences there, you now have a friend in Jim Cornette. You have one of the greatest managers of all time who's a resource. You can call him up and say, hey, Jim, this is what I'm thinking. Let me get your opinion on it.
If I have one true friend in wrestling, like I consider you guys friends in life,
outside of wrestling,
but my one true friend in wrestling is Jim Cornette.
And I mean,
because
just
that
think about
guy,
that. Think about what you're saying. The sentence you just said.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep, that guy is the only guy to really, we talked about other people that broke me in, brought me in, that I was supposed to trust and I could look up to and believe in, that ever looked out for me. Turns out that didn't happen. It wasn't the case. This guy truly was like looking out for the best in me and was like, you know what, you're not ready, but you will be ready one day, and I want to put you on the road, and I want to bring you up the right way, protect you, and give you that experience before we get you in the big time. And to this day, still, I could pick up the phone, I can still have a conversation with him, and it's just, he always has the best things to say about me. I have the best things to say about him. We always, we have a great rapport. I ended up doing a project with him later, and he, man, just, it says a lot about a person, especially someone of Jim Cornette's status in the wrestling business, where he doesn't have to affiliate with anybody. And here I am now, years after the Ring of Honor thing, I'm sitting in his living room, playing with his dog, and calling wrestling matches, that of this project that I had tried to whip together, and he just was so nice enough to, even consider helping me after that whole thing and being a friend of mine and knowing me. So, yeah, man, you're the man, Jim.
And, you just brought up Steve Corino a little while ago, and, just as something that's in the news, he switched his social media bio showing that he's no longer an NXT coach.
Really?
But he is now a full WWE producer. He's producing on the main roster. Word is a few weeks ago he changed things up. He was doing that on the NXT brand in Florida, but now on a larger scale, he's working on the booking and production for Raw and SmackDown live events. Reportedly has replaced Jamie Noble on the live event team, which includes Michael Hayes. And so now I guess Jamie Noble has some more time to focus on other WWE responsibilities.
You'll know when his influence is truly felt once we see someone stick their thumb in another man's bum.
Yeah.
Doot. Yep. So, so the time here is 11:30. We got about half an hour left with the show. You're tuned into the Pier 6 Roundtable. We're talking about independent wrestling and our lives in it. Caleb just, if you're just tuning in, was talking about his time with ROH.
Yeah. Sorry for the book.
No, that's it's been a while since you've been in here. It's cool that we can tell some of these stories. So let's look at where the business is right now. There's as far as the independent of things. Who are some of you guys' favorite independent wrestlers right now? Who are as far as on shows? When you guys see local or who travel through, who are some of the top guys that you guys are seeing independently who may not be everyday names now, but give another year or two, probably will be recognizable to a more mainstream audience?
I want to say Christian Casanova. Right now, man, I haven't seen anyone on a local level make as much headway in terms of getting to his goal as I have seen him in the past year. Consistently on top of the card over at Chaotic, is having some amazing matches at NEW. He's got his head on right, and he's just making waves. He's got a whole bunch of high-profile matches coming up with NEW. So, yeah, Christian is a lot of fun to watch these days. And one a year, I think I could credit Caleb for being the first person to bring this guy into the New England area. Is Endgame Paul Jourdain. Big fan of him. He's now coming in somewhat regularly. He's appeared for XWA a couple of times now, and just a great guy. And he can just do some pretty amazing stuff for a guy his size. So I expect big things from both those guys.
Yeah, he's also got that size and look that Vince McMahon reported so much, and he's got a lot of raw talent. He's got a lot of refined talent. Yeah,
he has a presence.
Yeah. And he's not a douche.
Yep.
He looks like a star. When if he walked into a room before, you just look and go, all right, that's somebody. That's that guy looks like he's somebody.
I was listening to the Jim Ross report from this week yesterday, and he was talking about Kofi Kingston, and he said, I've always thought the world of Kofi Kingston. He's a bright, educated, well-spoken. He's a professional guy, and he's a hell of an athlete. Everything you could look for in a top guy. He said, it's not about how big your muscles are. It's not about how big you are. It's about, are you dependable? And from what I can tell about Paul Jourdain, since I've been working with him over the last year, is not only does this guy have all the tools physically, this guy also has all the tools as a person, where he is dependable. And I can even just say this guy's coming up next Thursday.
I was just going to say, Thursday this week.
He's coming up Thursday because we have an event next Saturday. I'm sure we'll talk about it. But he's coming up because he works. The guy's not from New England. The guy is from Maryland. He lives in the Maryland area. And this guy is getting in his car and driving 6.5 hours up to New England, sometimes by himself. So this is literally, he's driving up by himself this coming Thursday to come do appearances at a middle school and different town events in Randolph, and doing an appearance in Braintree that night at Buffalo Wild Wings.
What time's that at? So
it's going to be from 7 to 9 o'clock at the Buffalo Wild Wings in Braintree, Massachusetts.
So if you're a fan of independent wrestling, that's definitely, it's a chance to meet and greet with some of the, so Paul Jourdain will be there. Who else?
Nico Silva, the Masshole, Mike McCarthy, Luscious Latasha, a few others, I'm sure.
So, if great way to meet and get some autographs if you want to do that.
Get some autographs, see some exclusive footage of the company, and, who else?
This is in support of this Saturday's New England All-Star Wrestling show. So, and we're going to talk about that card in a little bit.
But yeah, man, this guy he's dependable. All I had to do is ask, hey, are you coming up? Can you come up early and do all these appearances? He's like, hell yeah, man, I'm coming because I want to be a part of this. I want to be on the ground floor of this and build something up. And that's dependable.
Yeah.
When you can ask a whole roster of local guys, are you available to do something? And you just hear that cricket sound that you
guys
played
who
earlier.
could be 20 minutes away from where you need them to be.
But this guy's ready to get in his car and start driving at 5 a.m. to be in Massachusetts by noontime.
And you know what? He's gonna. Can you imagine a guy with his look and size going into middle schools, doing motivational stuff? I mean, those kids are gonna look at him like, "Holy cow,
this is legit."
This guy's a superhero. He's huge.
Yep.
It's that. I mean, it's like that '80s wrestling size. Like, there are so few guys who have that kind of size now that he's really gonna stand out.
Paul Jourdain is going to be a star.
Another name that you brought up who has been a part of New England wrestling on and off for the better part of 17 years, but really making a resurgence is Mike McCarthy, the Masshole, the former Tommy Knoxville. This is a guy who he took some serious time off and then came back and had a pretty serious leg injury. But since he's been back, Mike is firing on cylinders he didn't have. But you say firing on all cylinders. He's firing on cylinders he didn't have before. I mean, he has come back hungry. His promo game is on point now.
I also know that he won't mind bringing this up because it's very much a part of his life. But he's completely clean and sober, and he's cut drugs and alcohol out of his life. And he's making a point of that, to say that. So it's not like letting people know his personal life. He's very much making that a public thing. And if you don't think drugs and alcohol affect your work, look at what Mike McCarthy was doing 5 years ago and look at what he's doing now.
Yeah.
And you tell me that doesn't affect somebody's work.
He is the king of Oi style, Mike McCarthy, the Masshole. And, man, such a good dude. I mean, I've known him for so long at this point, and we've used him. We used him through the PWF days and whatnot. And to see him where he is now, and the work he's putting in, and how good and he's passionate about. It's not. That's the other thing. It's not just I'll wrestle on the weekends. He is so fired up and passionate about wrestling again that it's like that first year passion. Like you can see he loves it again. Mm-hmm. And man, it's awesome to see when somebody. Who always had great charisma and whatever, then gets a real fire, because I mean, it's awesome. It's pretty awesome. So who are some other guys who are any other?
I gotta go with Trigger the OG, of course. I'm a little biased, but another guy that's been around for a very long time and now making the waves that he's making and putting out the match quality that he's having. Again, this past Thursday, he stepped in the ring with a guy he's never wrestled before. I believe he's a House of Glory student. I shouldn't really call him a student anymore. Evander James.
I've seen him before.
If you're not familiar with him, get familiar with him because he's fantastic. The House of Glory guys came up this past Thursday night, and a car full of them, and they were fantastic. I got to manage Trigger the OG against Evander James, and then I got to manage Christian against Ken Broadway.
I thought that was him.
And it was just two fantastic matches. I was very, very lucky to be a part of.
Love that kid.
And to get involved with. And Ken Broadway's another guy, man.
He's $1 million.
And he's endorsed fully by Sasha Banks. So what more of a ringing endorsement do you need than that? So
yeah, that before the match with Ronda Rousey, so it was a few weeks out. That we talked about that hype up video they did where it was like that little feature
so
on
awesome,
her,
right?
And like where she talks about Amazing Red. That was so well done.
Yep.
I think if they did more stuff like that, I mean, I'm saying that, but this week they had after the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view, the ratings spiked on both shows. So it's I can armchair quarterback and say do more of this, but I just felt like, I mean, I know Rich Palladino reposted it first, and then, but man, what a great feature that was.
And that
about
was
her.
just like an online thing too.
Yeah.
That didn't really get much of a push. If they were putting that kind of stuff on the network, I think it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Instead of just, not that they're wasting it on the website, but how many people are going to WWE.com for like media purposes, like especially with the network now?
Right. I mean, you could do a feature show like that where just where you're showing people going back to their roots for training or what. I mean, I think that's something that people would really dig. But yeah, that was a cool feature, and yeah, Ken Broadway was a part of that. I tell you, it's again, there's so many really like pretty entertaining talents who are out there now, and it's just a matter of them getting now. It's like who's going to get the next opportunity. So, who are some guys that you guys, if you're aware, like I know you do some shows, Rich, out of the area. Who are some guys that you guys are aware of from outside of New England who you might like to see journey into New England and do some shows locally?
Brian Pillman Jr.
Yeah, it's crazy that he hasn't really been up here yet. With
Just
all the,
Connecticut, but
when I think of New England wrestling, for some reason I always forget and really don't think of Connecticut
North
for
New
some
York.
reason. Which that's really, I mean, maybe more so back in the day I would consider Connecticut like obviously regionally it's New England, but
when guys are working shots
wise,
there every weekend.
Yeah, but wrestling wise, I almost look at Connecticut now as part of like the New York wrestling scene
because a lot of it's NEW. I mean,
right.
He does the Bethany stuff, but I mean it's still pretty much his.
Yeah, but again, you have a great opportunity on Thursday nights to come see that talent from outside of the area. There's always fresh talent from the Graysons, who was a great team from New York.
Mm-hmm.
They're Bear Country. They're not from around here. They're New York,
but they're very much
Jersey
becoming
guys.
Part of the area now as well,
and deservedly so. And the chaotic tag champions
awesome.
and whatnot. Those guys are amazing. So yeah, New York's got some guys, and then they got the veterans like Dan Moff and Pinky Sanchez, who all these years later are still killing it and still like making you want to go out and buy tickets. I mean, Dan Moff at this point,
yeah, right.
He's still one of the scariest human beings to come across in the ring. Mm-hmm. So,
I think about some of the guys we saw. I mean, I know some of them are in the whole Future of Honor thing, but I couldn't help but think a guy like Ken Dixon couldn't have been up here and really,
he will be.
I think that style of wrestling is really. I'm trying to think of some of the other guys who were down there. That
the Ugly Ducklings always pop me when they come up and come around. Those guys are awesome. Lance Loon and Rob Killjoy and Coach Mikey. Those guys are awesome.
When we were first seeing them, Colby Carino was actually a part of the team, and
they actually just reunited last weekend.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. Yep. But that's they're always very entertaining and just. The chemistry that those guys have together is fun to watch. Yeah, I enjoy the Ugly Ducklings.
Be on the lookout for. He's another Future of Honor guy, but he's definitely going to be somebody I think down the road that people look at and go, oh, all right, this guy's got something. This guy's name is Brian Johnson.
Oh right, who did he wrestle on the taping? Did you say was it?
He's going to be.
Woods.
He's being a program with Josh Woods, but he's a very old school, narcissistic character. Comes out with the robe and everything, and I'm just thinking, man, what a fantastic hand this guy would be in the right scenario up here in New England. If the right creative came around and the right roster came around, and just the right guy to work with would come around, this guy would just really show up and would tear it up. I think very highly of him. Ken Dixon, as you mentioned, he's awesome. Dante Caballero,
he's
a kid that's
he's
really
entertaining.
coming up.
He's really good.
He's coming up and making something. Joe Keys, another kid that's really, really damn good. He's finding himself entertaining.
I almost feel like it would, although it's obviously not a job that you could give to somebody and pay them. It would almost benefit some of the bigger indies in the area. Like if I know Mike Antonucci has JT Dunn brings a lot of names up to him. I know the same thing happens with guys up in Chaotic, but it would almost be to send like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna have some guys who their job is to go out and just kind of scout.
Yep.
You know, find independent, and not just because my guys went down there, but have some guys you trust who can bring names up and sort of go with it there.
Well, I know that I forgot what talent it was. We had mentioned it a few weeks ago, and you had credited JT with finding them and bringing them to XWA. And then I showed up to XWA, and Mike was like, "Make sure you tell Matt that I found that guy." So don't sleep on Mike Antonucci. He does definitely. I mean, he's.
Who would it have been?
I think was it the guy
Darby
from
Allin or
no? Actually, it might have been.
Okay.
Or it might have been the guy Danny Rivera from California.
Sammy Guevara?
No, that was JT for sure because he wrestled him in Texas.
Yeah.
But anyways, Mike, he's always bringing in.
All right, Mike, I give you credit.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Love you, big guy.
Guys that you don't necessarily hear much of, and then they seemingly blow up. So
yeah.
But yeah, it might have been Darby Allin to begin with, but
maybe.
yeah, either way.
Interesting. It was officially announced last night at the Chaotic Wrestling Show that the NXT champion, Tommaso Ciampa, the Blackheart, will not just be appearing at the Chaotic Wrestling Cold Fury event this year, but he will actually be the special guest referee in the main event of JT Dunn versus Josh Briggs. So huge news there.
Yeah, we couldn't get it together last night.
Yeah,
the four of us last night couldn't get our crap together.
You were the king of all slacking zebras.
Yeah, well, they want to put their hands on us and throw us around the ring.
You are all zebras, and I am your king.
Mufasa, Mufasa, Mufasa.
Hey, listen, we've been trying to end our shows with some crazy music about wrestling. If you're a fan of the Netflix Glow show, they actually, in their second season, did a music video of them it was supposed to be their opening where they were in like the mall and stuff. Well, that was based on the original Glow ladies doing Nasty and Mean. Our last song for the day is Glow, Nasty and Mean. And boy, this song is nasty. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned. We got live programming coming up next.
Bye.
What?